What happens when aliens think killing a human is the end of their problems? But it's just the beginning. Today's story asks the terrifying question, what if death only made us stronger, hungrier, and really, really angry? The bone-white lights of the interrogation chamber flickered as I watched the HFYLegendsOfZang interrogator pace back and forth. Veltor, they called him. 7 feet of the scaled muscle with those unsettling violet eyes that never seemed to blink. He was fuming, mandibles clicking together in that way they do when they're utterly furious. I couldn't blame him. The human prisoner was supposed to be dead. Not just dead, executed, twice. The first time they used the neural disruptor, enough voltage to liquefy a Jovian war beast's central nervous system. The human, Mason Kade, according to his military tags, had convulsed, gone rigid, and then slumped forward in his restraints. No pulse, no breathing. The med scanner confirmed termination of life functions. That should have been the end. But 10 minutes later, as they were preparing to dispose of the body, Mason's eyes had snapped open. He'd looked right at Veltor and smiled. Not the desperate smile of a prisoner, the cold, calculated smile of a predator. "You should have aimed for the liver," he'd said, voice raspy but strong. The second execution was more traditional. A plasma bolt point blank to the chest, left a hole you could put your fist through. The smell of burned human flesh filled the chamber, acrid and sickeningly sweet at the same time. The body went limp again. The med scanners again confirmed death. That was 2 hours ago. Now I'm watching through the observation panel as Mason sits there with a glowing crater in his chest, scorch marks radiating across his ribs like black lightning. And he's breathing, slowly, deliberately, as if each inhale is a personal insult to Veltor's professional reputation. "Impossible," Veltor hisses, his translator barely catching the subsonic frequencies of his native tongue. "Even by human standards, this is impossible." Mason tilts his head. Despite the restraints, despite the wound that should have obliterated his heart, he looks relaxed, almost amused. "Shoot me again if it makes you feel better," he says, and I swear there's a trace of laughter in his voice. "Third time's a charm, isn't that what we say back on Earth?" Veltor's scales flush dark purple, pure rage in HFYLegendsOfZang body language. He barks an order, and the guards level their weapons again. Mason doesn't flinch, doesn't close his eyes, doesn't show a hint of fear as the plasma rifle discharges with a whine that makes my teeth ache. His body jerks back with the impact. His head lolls forward. Blood, human red, almost shocking against the sterile white of the chamber, spatters the floor. The med scanner beeps again. Deceased. Veltor stares at the body for a long moment, then turns to the guards. "Dump it in the cryo chute," he orders. "I want a full autopsy. Something is wrong with this specimen." As the interrogator storms out, I linger just long enough to see one of the guards approach the body. He reaches for the restraint controls, and that's when I see it. The smallest twitch of Mason's fingers. I should say something. I should warn them. But a part of me, the part that's been cataloging Veltor's atrocities for months, stays silent. The last thing I hear as I follow Veltor from the observation room is the guard's voice. "Hey, I think it moved." The door slides shut behind me, cutting off whatever came next. I was halfway to the command deck when the first screams echoed through the ship's comms. Not the usual screams of prisoners. I'd grown numb to those months ago. These were different. These were the sounds of trained HFYLegendsOfZang warriors in pure terror. "Security breach and detention block." The ship's AI announced its synthesized voice, eerily calm against the backdrop of chaos. "Medical emergency. Containment failure." Veltor froze mid-stride, his secondary eyelids sliding across those violet orbs, the equivalent of a human's jaw dropping. "Impossible," he muttered again, but this time the word carried less conviction and more fear. We rushed back toward the interrogation chamber, a full squad of armed guards falling in behind us. The corridor lights had switched to emergency red, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for us with every step. The screaming had stopped. That was worse somehow. The first body we found was just outside the chamber door, one of the guards who'd been ordered to dispose of Mason's corpse. Only there wasn't much left that resembled a guard. His exoskeleton had been peeled open. Not cut, not blasted, peeled like the rind from a fruit. The soft tissues beneath were just gone. Veltor hissed a command, and the remaining guards formed a defensive perimeter around us. Their scales had paled to an ashy gray, the Agrak-Suun equivalent of a human turning white with fear. "Where is the prisoner?" Veltor demanded, but nobody answered. We found the second guard 15 meters down the corridor that led to the cryo-storage. He was still alive, barely. Half of his face was missing, and what remained was locked in an expression of such primal horror that I had to look away. "He laughed," the dying guard whispered, as Veltor knelt beside him. We confirmed termination, triple-checked, no life signs. But when we unlocked the restraints, his breathing hitched bubbles of blue blood frothing at his throat. He laughed. Then he bit Zurin, just opened his mouth and took half his face off in one bite. The guard's remaining eye rolled wildly until it found mine, the only other non-Agrak-Suun present. "What are humans made of?" he asked me, his translator glitching with static. "What are you people?" Then his eye glazed over and he was gone. I didn't have an answer for him. I'd been an observer on this vessel for 3 standard cycles, documenting Veltor's interrogation techniques for the Galactic Council's War Crimes Tribunal. I'd seen his work on dozens of species, including 6 other humans. None of them had ever gotten up after execution. "Lock down all decks," Veltor ordered, his confidence returning with the familiarity of giving commands. "Full biocontainment protocols. I want the ship's AI running continuous scans for human life signs." One of the guards, a young officer with scales so light they were almost translucent, cleared his throat. "Sir, if his life signs registered as terminated on multiple scans..." Veltor's head snapped toward him. "Then come up with something else to scan for movement. Heat signatures. Anything." The ship's AI chimed in its voice, somehow managing to sound both serene and concerned. "Alert detention and level access shaft has been compromised. Unidentified biological material detected in ventilation system." Veltor's eyes narrowed to slits. "Where is it heading?" "Unable to determine. Biometric scanners indicate anomalous readings consistent with both living and necrotic tissue." I felt my stomach twist. In all my years documenting atrocities across 17 systems, and I'd never heard anything like that. "Sir," said another guard, his voice tight with controlled panic. "The human, if that's what it still is, it left something in the chamber." We turned back to the interrogation room. The door was half melted, the metal still glowing orange at the edges. Inside the restraint chair was empty, the bonds torn apart rather than unlocked. And on the pristine white wall, written in what could only be the guard, Zurin's blue blood, was a single phrase: "Thanks for the third chance." The med scanner that had pronounced Mason dead 3 times lay shattered on the floor, its display still blinking, one final reading: "Subject anomalous, Revenant strain detected. Recommend immediate termination." Too late for that. I followed Veltor as he stormed through the ship's corridors, his rage barely contained beneath his officer's discipline. We ended up in the secondary interrogation wing, where the low-value prisoners were kept, those whose information wasn't deemed urgent enough for Veltor's personal attention. "Bring me the Xenopilot," he snapped at the duty officer, the one from the human trading vessel. I knew who he meant: Lieutenant Kale Rennick, a blue-scaled Mantride pilot who'd been captured alongside 3 human crewmates when their merchant ship strayed too close to contested space. The humans had been separated for special interrogation. Rennick had been deemed less valuable intelligence. Until now. The guards brought him in, slender, almost delicate by his species standards, with those characteristic blue scales that shimmered under the harsh lights. His 6-fingered hands were bound, and his posture was that of someone who'd given up hope days ago. Then he saw Veltor, and something changed in his compound eyes. Fear, yes, but also a strange recognition. Veltor didn't waste time with the usual intimidation tactics. "The human prisoner, Mason Kade. What do you know about him, Jima?" Rennick's eyes widened. His secondary breathing slits fluttered rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "You brought a Revenant aboard your ship," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Answer the question," Veltor pressed, moving closer. "What is a Revenant?" Rennick shrank back against his chair. was the human named Mason, dark hair scar across his left collarbone like a starburst. The room went silent. That was a perfect description of our escaped prisoner, down to the distinctive scar I'd noted in my observation logs. Before Veltor could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then stabilized. The ship's ambient hum, so constant we'd all stopped noticing it, faltered for just a moment. "He's in the power systems," Rennick said, his voice flat with fatalism. "We're all dead." "He's just one human," Veltor growled, "damaged and unarmed." Rennick made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "He's not undead. He's something worse." The lights flickered again and the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. The ship's environmental control systems were being tampered with. "Explain," Veltor demanded. "Now." Rennick looked around the room as if gauging whether any of us would survive long enough for his information to matter. Hundreds of cycles ago, Earth was hit by something they call the Lazarus event. He began his translator, struggling with the human term. A techno-biological plague, part virus, part nanite, part something that humans still don't fully understand. The history archives say humans nearly went extinct. I noted, recalling my xenology studies. A pandemic. "That's what everyone thinks," Rennick said, his gaze locking onto mine. "That's what humans let everyone think. But they didn't just die and recover. They evolved." The ship shuddered slightly beneath us. Somewhere distant, an alarm began to wail. The Lazarus virus rewrote human biology at a fundamental level. Rennick continued, speaking faster now. "Most infected died, yes, but a small percentage, less than 1 in 1,000, they died and then came back. Their cellular structure completely reconfigured. They called them Revenants. Reanimated corpses," Veltor scoffed. "Primitive mythology." "No, you don't understand." Rennick's voice rose in pitch. "They're not mindless. They come back with everything intact: memories, skills, intelligence. But altered, enhanced healing, reduced pain response, and hunger. A hunger like nothing you've ever seen." "For what?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "Protein, living tissue. It doesn't matter what species, they just need to feed the regeneration process." Rennick's eyes darted to the door. "And they can spread it. Not like a normal virus, it's not airborne. But their bite, their blood, any fluid exchange, it carries the nanites." The ship-wide comms crackled to life, making us all jump. For a moment, there was just static. Then a voice, Mason's voice, came through, unnaturally calm. "Attention, crew of the HFYLegendsOfZang vessel. This is Mason Kade, formerly deceased. I've accessed your ship's systems and discovered something interesting. Did you know you have 3 other humans in custody, I should say? They weren't Revenants before. They are now." Veltor cursed in his native tongue, the sound like rocks grating together. "They're not as stable as natural Revenants." Mason's voice continued, conversational, almost friendly. "First-generation converts tend to be less discriminating in what they consider food. Terminate the other prisoners immediately." Veltor barked into his comm unit. More static, then Mason again. "Too late. I already let them out. Consider it a social experiment. How many of your crew can a hungry, newly turned Revenant consume in 30 minutes, I'm guessing? A lot." "They don't just kill," Rennick whispered, trembling now. "They remember everything. Who hurt them? Who killed them? And they don't forgive." "Can they be killed?" Veltor demanded. "Total cellular disruption." Rennick nodded. "Incineration. Massive trauma to the brainstem. But it has to be complete, immediate. Give them even seconds to adapt and the nanites start rebuilding." The lights flickered again, longer this time. When they came back, Mason's voice returned with them. "I found your knife room, by the way. All those beautiful tools. You have quite the collection, Veltor. Testing which species can endure what kinds of pain. Very scientific of you." A long pause, then. "I'm going to enjoy testing some theories of my own." The emergency alert system screamed to life, bathing the interrogation room in pulses of crimson light. Veltor barked orders into his comm, but was met with bursts of static interspersed with screams. "Engineering reports power fluctuations in all forward sections." reported the duty officer, her scales blanched, almost white with fear. They're trying to isolate the problem, but systems keep rerouting against their commands. It's him, Rennick murmured. Revenants who were technical specialists before conversion, they develop an unnatural affinity for machinery, like the virus merges with technology somehow. The floor beneath us vibrated as the ship's massive engines stuttered, then roared back to life at dangerously high output levels. "He's overriding the engine safeguards," Veltor snarled. "Lock down engineering." His order was cut short as every light in the section died simultaneously. In the pitch darkness, the only illumination came from the emergency strips along the floor and the soft bioluminescent glow of Rennick's eyes. I heard Veltor's translator click off, then back on. "Activate your emergency implants," he ordered. The guards touched patches behind their ear membranes, and their eyes began to glow with artificial night vision. I had no such implants. In the darkness, I was effectively blind. "What about the escape pods?" I asked, trying to keep the rising panic from my voice. I'd documented war crimes across 17 systems, but always as an observer, never as a potential victim. "Attempting to access launch protocols," the duty officer replied, her claws dancing across her datapad. After a moment, she looked up, the glow of the screen illuminating her face from below in a ghastly light. "All escape pod launch systems have been locked out. The override codes have been changed." A new alarm joined the cacophony, the hull breach warning. But instead of the expected decompression alerts, the ship's internal comm system crackled back to life. Mason's voice filled the darkened room, eerily conversational. "Hello, lovely abductors. This is your new ship administrator speaking. I've taken the liberty of making a few adjustments to our life support systems. Specifically, I've rerouted all oxygen from the bridge and officer quarters to the prisoner levels. Seems only fair, don't you think?" Veltor's mandibles clicked in barely suppressed rage. "Locate him now." "Oh, don't bother," Mason continued, as if he could hear us. Maybe he could. "Your internal sensors are showing you exactly what I want them to show, but since you're so interested in my whereabouts..." The voice paused, and a cold dread settled in my stomach. "I found the knife room. Real fun stuff you've got in here, Veltor. I particularly like that neural flare, the one you used on the Centauri colonists last week. The woman with the twin daughters. Remember how you promised to let them go if she told you the colony defense codes I do? She's with me now, by the way." "Well, parts of her are." Another pause. I could hear Veltor's breathing quicken, the closest thing to fear I'd ever sensed from him. "Who's next?" Mason's voice whispered so close it felt like he was standing right behind me in the darkness. "Eeny, meeny, miny, you." The comms cut out, leaving us in a silence broken only by the wail of distant alarms. "Get us to the armory," Veltor ordered, his voice tight. "Energy weapons are useless against these things. We need kinetic rounds. Explosives." As we moved through the darkened corridors, guided by the guard's night vision and the flickering emergency lighting that sputtered on and off at random intervals, Rennick continued his explanation, information bartered for the slim hope of survival. "Conventional energy weapons just accelerate their adaptation," he said between labored breaths as we hurried along. "The nanites absorb and redistribute the energy. Each shot that doesn't kill them makes them stronger, more resistant." "But physical trauma works?" I asked. "High-powered kinetic rounds to the brainstem, separation of the head from the body, complete destruction of the central nervous system," Rennick confirmed. "But you have to be thorough. Even then they heal. Slower from physical damage, but they heal." We passed a security checkpoint that had been redecorated. The walls were painted with blue Agraxun blood, and the guard station was empty, save for a pile of exoskeletal fragments that had once been sentient beings. "How many are we dealing with?" Veltor demanded, his steely composure beginning to crack at the edges. "The human and the 3 prisoners he converted." Rennick shook his head, his antenna quivering. "By now, more. Much more. Every crew member they've killed and consumed has a chance of reanimation, especially if Mason deliberately infected them. The conversion rate," I began, "vastly higher when implemented by a mature Revenant." Rennick cut me off. "They can control it. Focus the nanites. A natural Revenant like Mason can initiate conversion in nearly 80% of compatible physiologies. Compatible, Veltor echoed. Protein-based life forms, carbon cycle species. Rennick gestured around us, like your entire crew. We reached the armory door to find it partially melted, just like the interrogation chamber had been. Inside, weapons racks had been emptied. Whatever hadn't been taken had been systematically destroyed. He's arming them. Arm them, one of the guards whispered. Veltor's comm unit crackled. Command deck to interrogator Veltor. We've captured one of the infected, a crew member from maintenance. Medical is performing analysis now. For the first time since this nightmare began, Veltor's posture relaxed slightly. Bring the specimen to Science Bay 3. We'll meet you there. The Science Bay was a sterile white chamber dominated by a transparent isolation tube in its center. Inside, strapped to an examination table, lay what had once been an Igrak-Suan engineer. His exoskeleton had partially sloughed off, revealing glistening, pulsating tissue beneath. His eyes, once the characteristic violet of his species, had turned milky white with pinprick pupils. Vital signs, Veltor asked the medical officer who stood nervously at the monitoring station. That's just it, sir. There aren't any. No respiration, no cardiac function. The tissue is technically necrotic, and yet, as if on cue, the engineer's head snapped toward us, jaws working silently against the restraints. A clear fluid dripped from his mandibles, sizzling where it hit the metal table. Impossible, Veltor muttered, but the word had lost all conviction. The nanites must be sustaining cellular function without traditional biological processes, the medical officer explained. We were about to perform a more detailed examination when the rest of her explanation was lost as the engineer's body arched violently against the raised restraints. There was a wet tearing sound and his thorax split open, revealing not the expected internal organs, but a writhing mass of what looked like metallic worms. Holy, one of the guards began, but never finished. The isolation tube shattered outward in a spray of transparent shards. The thing that had been an engineer leapt from the table with impossible speed, nanite-infused fluid spraying from its ruptured body cavity. The guard closest to the tube went down first, the engineer's claws tearing through his combat armor like it was tissue. The second and third guards opened fire with the few functional weapons we'd salvaged, but their energy weapons just seemed to make the creature stronger, its movements more frenzied. Run! Rennick screamed, already backing toward the door. It's not trying to feed, it's just spreading the nanites. As we fled the science bay, I caught a glimpse of the fallen guard beginning to twitch his own exoskeleton, starting to crack from within. Now we had two. I need to get off this ship, Rennick pleaded as we raced through the corridors. His eyes found mine desperate. Kill me before he gets here. I won't survive a second death like that. None of us will. We barricaded ourselves in the secondary command center, a reinforced bunker designed to maintain ship control in case the main bridge was compromised. Veltor immediately began accessing security feeds, but most showed only static or empty corridors slick with blue blood. Find me something, he snarled at his remaining officers. How did one human bring my ship to its knees? As if responding to his question, the main view screen flickered to life. It wasn't a security feed, it was a recording one I recognized. The timestamp showed it was from 3 days ago, Mason Kade's first interrogation. I didn't authorize playback, Veltor said, his voice low with confusion and rage. He wants us to see this, I realized aloud. He's showing us why. On screen, Mason sat strapped to the interrogation chair, his face bruised but defiant. Veltor circled him like a predator, tapping a neural probe against his palm in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The encryption codes for the human defense grid, Veltor demanded on the recording. Give them to me and your death will be quick. Mason smiled, that same cold, knowing smile I'd seen after his first resurrection. You know what your problem is? You think death is the worst thing you can threaten a human with. Veltor struck him with the probe. Mason's body convulsed, but he didn't scream. Your crew died screaming, Veltor continued on a screen. All except the pilot. He might survive if you cooperate. Rennick, Mason gasped, blood trickling from his nose. His name is Kale Rennick, and he's not just our pilot, he's family. Another strike with the probe. This time Mason did scream, a sound that made my skin crawl even through the recording. Family, Veltor laughed. A Xeno. Your species truly is pathetic. Sentiment for lesser beings. Mason's eyes had rolled back in his head, but somehow he managed to focus again. We adopt strays. It's a human thing. You wouldn't understand. The next few minutes were difficult to watch. Veltor employed his most creative techniques, the ones that had made him infamous among prisoners across 3 sectors. Through it all, Mason refused to give up the codes. Finally, Veltor stepped back, mandibles clicking in frustration. You will die human, slowly, painfully. Your friend will watch and then he will die too. Mason, barely conscious, somehow found the strength to lift his head. Blood bubbled from his lips as he spoke. This is the part where you wish humans stayed extinct. Veltor drove the probe directly into Mason's heart. On screen, the human convulsed one final time and went still. The med scanner confirmed death. Dispose of this, Veltor ordered the guards, and the recording ended. In the silence that followed, Rennick's voice was barely a whisper. You killed him because he wouldn't help you attack his homeworld. Veltor didn't deny it. The human defense grid protects 12 colonies, strategic targets. And now he's killing you because you killed him first. I said, the terrible logic of it finally clear. A slow, clapping sound echoed through the command center. We spun around to find all screens showing the same image, Mason standing in what appeared to be the ship's main engineering bay. Behind him, the massive antimatter containment chamber pulsed with ominous energy. But now you're getting it, Mason said, his voice coming through every speaker simultaneously. Cause and effect. You wanted to hurt people I care about. Now I'm returning the favor. He looked different now. The hole in his chest had partially closed the edges, knitting together with metallic filaments visible just beneath his skin. One of his arms ended not in a hand, but in a twisted amalgamation of metal and bone, a makeshift blade fashioned from the ship itself. Did you know, Mason continued almost conversationally, that your species has 37 pain receptor types, humans only have 9. Guess which ones the nanites rebuilt first? A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission from elsewhere on the ship. Veltor hesitated, then accepted it. A new face appeared on screen, another Igrak, but this one wore no military insignia. His scales bore the distinctive modeling of a labor caste worker. I recognized him as part of the engineering crew, one of many who maintained the ship's massive engines. Technician Vrask reporting, he said, his posture formal, despite the chaos around him. Report your location and status, Veltor ordered. I'm in auxiliary maintenance, Vrask replied, with the human. The camera panned to show Mason standing beside him, that metallic arm gleaming under the emergency lights. Strangely, Mason made no move to attack. What is the meaning of this? Veltor demanded. Are you a hostage? Vrask laughed, a harsh sound entirely devoid of humor. No interrogator. I am a volunteer. Veltor's scales flushed dark with rage. Treason. Is it treason to side with justice? Vrask asked, his voice steady now. 3 cycles I've served on this vessel. 3 cycles watching you torture prisoners for information they often didn't have. How many died begging for mercy that never came? You're betraying your own species, Veltor hissed. I'm choosing a side, Vrask countered, between torturers and their victims. The human offered me a choice, more than you ever did. Mason stepped forward, that unnerving smile playing at his lips. Did you know your engine room crew are mostly press gang laborers from conquered worlds? They're not feeling very loyal right now. They're helping him, Rennick whispered beside me. Sweet stars, they're helping him. I'd rather follow a human monster than die begging to an alien sadist, Vrask said, his gaze steady on Veltor. At least he gives us a choice, join or die. You never even saw us as people. I glanced at Veltor and saw something I'd never thought possible: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. What do you want? Veltor finally asked. Mason's smile widened. Now we're negotiating interesting. He stepped closer to the camera. I want what all the dead want, Veltor. Revenge. The ship has a self-destruct sequence, Veltor threatened. I'll destroy us all before I surrender. No, you won't, Mason replied confidently, because deep down under all that exoskeleton and cruelty, you're a coward. You only fight when you know you'll win. Mason turned to Vrask. Show him. The technician tapped a command sequence into his datapad. On our screens, a new feed appeared the main bridge. It was a slaughterhouse. Bodies of officers lay sprawled across control stations, their exoskeletons cracked open like eggs. Standing amid the carnage were three figures I recognized with a jolt of horror, the other human prisoners now transformed as Mason had been. Their movements were jerky, less controlled than his, but they moved with terrible purpose as they systematically disabled the bridge systems. "Your main command crew is dead," Mason explained, "and I've locked you out of all critical systems. The self-destruct requires bridge authorization, which you no longer have." Veltor slammed his fist on the console. "What do you want?" he repeated, desperation finally seeping into his voice. "I want you to understand what you have done." Mason replied, his voice suddenly serious. "You've awakened something that should have stayed sleeping. For centuries, humans have kept the Revenant secret contained controlled. Most of us live quiet lives, taking synthesized proteins, managing our condition. But now the secret's out." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes reflecting light in an unnervingly predatory way. "And there are a lot of worlds out there who have done humans wrong." Vrask spoke again, addressing not just Veltor, but all of us. "The human has taken control of communications. He's sent data packets to every colony world with a human population. Information about what happened here, about what Veltor tried to do." "The defense grid codes," I breathed, understanding dawning. "That's why you wouldn't give them up. They aren't just defensive, are they?" Mason nodded approvingly. "Smart observer. The Earth defense grid doesn't just shield our worlds, it connects them. And now they all know what happened here." "You've started a war," Veltor said. "No," Mason corrected him. "You did. I'm just making sure it's one you can't win." Alarms blared again, new ones this time. The lockdown seals on the command center's reinforced doors began to glow red hot. "He's burning through!" one of the remaining officers shouted, raising his weapon. Veltor backed away from the door, his composure finally shattered. "Seal the inner chamber now." But it was too late. The massive Durasteel door didn't so much open as melt. The metal ran like liquid, forming puddles on the deck plating that continued to bubble and hiss. Through the newly created aperture stepped Mason alone. He looked barely human now. His transformation had accelerated, skin taking on a metallic sheen, veins pulsing with an eerie blue light beneath the surface. The wound in his chest had closed, completely replaced by what appeared to be an organic heat sink that pulsed in rhythm with his movements. His left arm ended in that jagged metal blade, twisted metal and bone fused together in grotesque harmony. Most disturbing was his face. Half of it remained recognizably human, but the other half had begun to skeletonize flesh, receding to reveal a metallic skull beneath. One end of the eye remained human, dark, intelligent, filled with cold rage. The other was a glowing blue orb that seemed to scan everything in the room, assessing threats and weak points with inhuman precision. "Hello, Veltor," Mason said, his voice a dual-tone harmony that sent chills down my spine. "Miss me?" The guards opened fire immediately. Energy bolts sizzled through the air, striking Mason square in the chest. He staggered back half a step, then straightened. Where the bolts had hit, his flesh bubbled and reformed, the nanites visibly knitting new tissue before our eyes. "My turn," Mason said. He moved with impossible speed. The first guard died before he could fire a second shot, that blade arm slicing through his exoskeleton like it was paper. The second and third guards backed away, still firing desperately, but Mason seemed to anticipate their movements, dodging with unnatural grace. "Run!" Rennick shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the inner chamber. I glanced back just long enough to see one of the guards go down. Mason's hand plunged deep into his thoracic cavity. The other guard threw down his weapon and dropped to his knees. "Please," he begged, "I have spawned children." Mason paused, his head tilting slightly. For a moment, something like conflict passed across the human parts of his face. "Go," he said finally. "Take the escape pod at the end of this corridor. It's the only one I haven't disabled." The guard didn't question his luck. He scrambled to his feet and ran. Rennick pulled me into the inner chamber, where Veltor was frantically trying to access emergency systems through a backup terminal. "It's over," I told him. "There's nowhere left to run." Veltor spun toward me, mandibles flared in a threat display. This ship has classified technology, weapons research, and I cannot allow it to fall into human hands. Your ship is already lost, Rennick said. Your crew is either dead or they've joined him. Outside the chamber, we could hear Mason dispatching the last pockets of resistance. The sounds were wet, sickening. Metal tearing through chitin followed by desperate screams that cut off abruptly. Veltor's hand moved to his sidearm, a compact disintegrator pistol. I still have this, he hissed. A full molecular breakdown. Even nanites can't recover from that. There's just one problem, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. You only have one shot, and there are two of us between you and him. Veltor's eyes narrowed. You're siding with the abomination? I'm siding against torture, I answered, against the kind of cruelty I've documented in your interrogation chambers for 3 cycles, the kind that created this nightmare in the first place. The inner chamber door began to glow just as the outer one had. Veltor backed against the far wall, weapon raised. His scales had paled to an ashen gray pure terror. The mission was sanctioned, he said, as if trying to convince himself more than us. The information was critical to planetary security. Keep telling yourself that, I said as Rennick and I moved to the sides of the room, away from the door and out of Veltor's direct line of fire. The door didn't melt this time. It exploded, inward shards of metal flying across the chamber like shrapnel. Through the smoke stepped Mason, his blade arm dripping blue blood that sizzled against the metal floor. Veltor fired immediately. The disintegrator shot, his one chance, struck Mason directly in the chest. For a moment, a perfect circular hole appeared, edges glowing with a molecular breakdown. I could see straight through him to the weapon door behind. Mason looked down at the wound, then back up at Veltor. The hole was already closing, nanites working furiously to rebuild the damaged tissue. You've had 3 chances to kill me, Mason said, advancing slowly. This was your last one. Veltor dropped the useless weapon, his back pressed against the wall. For the first time, I saw him for what he truly was beneath the uniform and authority, a coward who could only dominate those already in chains. Wait, Veltor pleaded, all pretense of dignity gone. I can give you information. Deployment patterns, defense codes. You still don't understand, Mason said now, just steps away. I don't want your information. I want your pain. He raised his human hand, and I saw it was holding something, a neural probe. The same one Veltor had used on him during that first fatal interrogation. You gave me pain, Mason said, voice softening to an almost gentle tone. I'll return the favor. The lights went out. In the darkness, Veltor's screams told us everything we needed to know. 3 weeks later, he stood in the observation bay of the UNSC Redemption, watching the stars streak by as we headed back to human space. Beside me, Cale Rennick fidgeted nervously with the hem of his newly issued human naval uniform. Do you think they'll really let me serve? He asked, eyes fixed on the stars beyond the reinforced glass. Mason vouched for you, I replied. Said you were family. In my experience, humans take that seriously. The human recovery crews had found us 7 hours after Veltor's final screams had faded into silence. They'd been dispatched the moment Mason's data packets reached Earth Command, a rescue mission with explicit orders to recover any survivors, human or otherwise. They'd found Rennick and me locked in a secure communications room unharmed. They'd found 23 Agraxuan crew members who had sided with Mason, mostly engineering and maintenance workers. Of Veltor, they found only his insignia, polished to a shine and placed carefully on the command chair. Of Mason himself, there was no sign, just a recorded message indicating he had taken the newly converted human Revenants with him on an Agraxuan scout vessel. His mission, he'd said, was to clean house, whatever that meant. The Admiralty is in full crisis mode, I told Rennick. This changes the balance of power. The Agraxuan Dominion has been building toward war for years, thinking humans were still recovering from the Lazarus event. Now they know better. They know humans have monsters of their own, Rennick said quietly. A soft chime indicated someone was at the door. It slid open to reveal Captain Eliza Chen, commanding officer of the Redemption. Her expression was grave. We've received a transmission you both should see, she said without preamble. In the ship's secure briefing room, Chen activated the view screen. The image that appeared made my blood run cold. Mason stood on the bridge of a sleek black vessel I didn't recognize. Behind him stood at least a dozen other transformed humans, their features exhibiting varying stages of the same metallic metamorphosis. But it was the view through the bridge windows that truly horrified me, an Igrak-Suan battleship, massive and bristling with weapons floating dead in space. Its hull was breached in multiple locations, atmosphere venting in crystalline plumes into the void. "Hello, old friends," Mason said, his voice somehow even more unsettling than before. "Just checking in. We've been busy." "How many ships?" Chen asked, her voice tight. "This makes 7, Mason replied with a terrible smile. "All military vessels, all with extensive records of human captives. We're being selective." "You're starting a war," Chen said. Mason shook his head. "No, Captain. I'm preventing one. The Dominion was preparing for full-scale invasion. We found the plans in their secure databases. They're backing down now. Amazing how quickly bullies reconsider when the supposed victim bites back." "You can't just," Chen began, but Mason cut her off. "We're not asking permission, Captain. For centuries, we Revenants have lived in the shadows, hiding what we are taking, our synthesized proteins, playing by the rules. But the rules changed when Veltor decided to cut open a human to see what made him tick." Mason's expression softened slightly as his gaze found Rennick. "You okay, Kale?" Rennick managed a nod. "They're treating me well." "Good. You're still family no matter what." Mason's attention returned to Captain Chen. "We're heading to the Scylla Nebula next. Intelligence suggests there's a Dominion black site there. More prisoners to free." "Mason," I found myself speaking up. "What happens when this is over? When you have made your point?" His partially metallic face shifted in what might have been contemplation. "That depends on the Dominion and on Earth Command. If they're smart, they'll negotiate a real peace. If not..." He shrugged, the movement oddly human despite his transformed state. "Either way, the old rules are gone. The universe knows what humans can become now, what we've always been beneath the surface." The image shifted to show the exterior of Mason's vessel as it approached the crippled Igrak-Suan battleship. I realized with a start that his ship was also Igrak-Suan in design, but modified, enhanced with technology I couldn't identify. "Round 2, Mason said, and for a moment I saw the man he had been before, a determined, fierce, but still recognizably human. "Let's try not to die this time." The transmission ended, leaving us in silence. "What do we do?" Rennick asked finally. Captain Chen's expression was unreadable. "We prepare for peace or war, whichever comes. And we pray that whatever Mason has become remembers enough of his humanity to know when to stop." As we headed back to Earth, I couldn't help but wonder if we were bringing warning of a new threat or heralding the rise of a new protector. Perhaps both. One thing was certain, the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. If you enjoyed this story of humanity unleashing our terrifying potential against those who wronged us, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of humans being the galaxy's worst nightmare. Leave a comment below telling me what kind of HFY story you want to hear next, whether it's more Revenant, action, or something entirely new. Remember, in space, no one can hear you scream, unless you're screaming about how awesome humans are. See you in the next one.